Hello, this is Talking Europe on France 24. I'm Catherine Nicholson. Today joined by Vilnius from Lithuania's Foreign Minister, Linas Linkevicius. Thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you.
Now, your country might be one of the smaller ones in Europe geographically, but it is right in the spotlight right now of one of the biggest ongoing news stories that began in the summer, the ongoing repression of protesters in Belarus after that contested election in August. Now, at the time of recording this interview, members of the opposition to President Lukashenko still in exile, many of them in Lithuania, many in detention or facing repression. Now, your country, Lithuania, joined its Baltic neighbours, Estonia and Latvia, in imposing sanctions on Russia recently before waiting for the rest of the EU to join in. Are you confident that the rest of the EU will, as a bloc, impose sanctions on Belarus?
I hope so, because international reaction, international community must really react jointly, forcefully, but also urgently. It's not always happening, as we know, with objective reasons. But nevertheless, we have to speak up, because these events are happening in our continent, and we cannot stay impartial here.
Now, there is some doubt, of course, isn't there, that the EU as a bloc might impose sanctions. It's been suggested that Cyprus has been blocking the matter of sanctions against Belarus. Is that the case?
I'm not now in the position to describe positions of various states, but you're right. Sometimes it takes time to adjust these positions. We were tensions in the Mediterranean. And I spoke with the Foreign Minister of Cyprus recently. They also discussed these issues. I stressed that this is very important, of course, to settle the situation in the Mediterranean and to calm down emotions and to prove pathway through the diplomacy and to decrease tensions. We see some symptoms there, but at the same time, the situation cannot be kept conditional, so to say, for imposing sanctions on Belarus, because it's already 1 month after the elections, which were definitely fake. And all these tensions were just raising and still not calming down. So we have to react. It's our common European interest. So I hope we will somehow settle this situation.
Well, you say it's in the common European interest to impose sanctions, but there have been suggestions that by imposing sanctions, the EU could push Belarus into a closer relationship with Russia. Do you agree that that is a possible outcome?
I do not agree, because we already introduced the sanctions after 2010. You know, there were more than 100, up to 150 persons listed, and including President Lukashenko at that time. So it was not a problem with regard to channels of communication. But here, you know, what happened basically after all these intimidations, humiliations, torturing, raping even, allegedly crimes were committed. So least we can do just to sanction those who committed these possible crimes, and international independent investigations should be also organized, and definitely those who did that, they should be kept accounted, and sanctions is minimum we can do. It's nothing to do with any pushing towards Russia or backwards.
Well, there have been as well suggestions that Vladimir Putin could send Russian security forces in to back up Belarussian security forces. And we also know that President Lukashenko has ordered half of Belarus's army to enter combat readiness in response to what he called threats from the West. How high would you gauge the risk of an actual armed flare-up to be?
This, you know, threats by external danger, this is just rhetoric, and maybe to prove this calls for help from Russia, but nothing else. It shouldn't be very gifted, you know, by intelligence skills to check that nobody is going to enter Belarus or challenge or attack or whatever. It's really fake whatsoever. And this is clear as it is, so it's definitely groundless. Also, I'd like to say it's very important to tell Russia they are still contemplating loudly this option of invasion, if asked, if necessary, but we know that there's no reasons, legal, moral, practical, military, to do that. So,
well, at the same time, if I might just jump in, you know, if we look back at what happened in Ukraine, on Ukrainian territory in 2014, many people would have thought that it wasn't possible that Russia would back up Ukrainian separatists and send in forces at that point?
There are some parallels, maybe different variations. There are some peculiarities. At that time, we know that in Crimea they denied intervention at all, and then admitted that it was true. In Donbass, they still denying being party to the conflict, so it's also becoming usual rhetoric. So here is a bit different because they are supposed to come under the request of the government, as they say. But outgoing president called for this assistance. But would like to say that whatever happens, we do not see any reason to do that. And also we have to remind that whatever the outgoing president does, speaks, or possibly signs on behalf of the country, it will not be valid because he expired his moral and political mandate, and soon will be legal mandate will be expired as well.
I'd like to move on to talking about events inside of Russia. The poisoning on August 20th of Alexei Navalny, the prominent opponent, of course, of President Putin. Experts in Germany and France have now said that he was poisoned with a Novichok nerve agent that was developed originally in the Soviet Union, of course. President Macron has called this an assassination attempt. The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, says that his country was not involved. He's so far given no evidence. There are calls for an investigation. Do you believe Sergei Lavrov?
It's not first time happening. They're denying everything what is obvious and it's becoming new normal. With regard to this poisoning, it's also not first time happening. We can recall up to 10 events of this political poisonings. Some of them were more famous, some less. But when it was Salisbury, it was quite a harsh reaction because it was quite chemical weapon used on NATO territory. Now it's not NATO territory, but still a chemical weapon produced in military labs, proved by not just by Germany, but also by experts of other countries, and must be consequences. So it should be investigated at least by Organization for Protection of Chemical Weapons. And Russia must cooperate. If not, I am convinced also must be sanctions. So how we will react, it will be also kind of proof. Are we taking this new normal as real, as something which is just implied to us forcefully, or are we going to react? Because this is the issue of consistency, of principled approach, as we have to really take it very seriously.
Well, just to move on to another issue where Russia is potentially involved, Moscow has recently offered to mediate between Turkey and Cyprus, an EU state, of course, over alleged illegal Turkish drilling for oil and gas in the eastern Mediterranean. Russia, of course, a world power, a regional power. It's not one of the parties involved in this particular dispute. Would you be open to Russia having that mediation role?
So far, unfortunately, again, I have to say that objectively, Russians are not mediating or managing crisis, but inflicting crisis and setting crisis, and through these crises trying to have influence, be it frozen conflicts or active conflict like in Ukraine. So definitely we cannot trust this mediation role. But at the same time, this is a lesson that if something is kind of emptied as a leadership, vacuum of leadership, everybody would like to fill it in. And unfortunately, this is happening. So if we'll not solve this issue among European Union members or among NATO members, because those countries are members of those organizations, others will come and fill in with sometimes doubtful reasoning. And we have really to, again, rely on diplomacy, on really direct engagement. And I hear already some signals of de-escalation happening. So let's hope it will be solved.
OK, a word finally about Brexit. In the last few days, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his government have stated that they would be prepared to break international law over Brexit. Simple question to you. Do you trust Boris Johnson?
Oh, I know him personally and definitely a very interesting personality. But here we're talking about possible violation of international law. And here is also a matter of principle and precedent, I would say. So I was just recently in London. It was definitely discussed quite widely among media, politicians, and I didn't meet too many people approving this. And I believe they should really act very responsibly in taking these decisions. And I hope they will do that, understanding seriousness. So this is part of the game, and I'm sorry to remind, but this could undermine all efforts to negotiate Brexit. In general, this is already kind of stalemate situation that could be even more complicated.
You said it's part of the game. Do you mean that you believe that this threat is, in fact, a pure negotiating tactic rather than a real threat?
I cannot guess whether it's tactics or it's something else, but I'm just saying, trying to assess facts. And these facts, they're telling that this is definitely something should be very seriously reassessed, I believe. And I hope that our British friends will take this responsibly and will take adequate decisions in the end of the day. Now we cannot see the progress in this regard, but I hope it will be some changes. I hope so.
Well, on the British side, government ministers there, including Boris Johnson, claiming that the EU is threatening to block food exports into Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom. Would you want food exports into Northern Ireland to be blocked if there were indeed a perceived risk to the EU's single market?
First of all, with regard to blockage, I do not have any information about any intentions to do that. I don't believe it's true, first of all. When it comes to the very subtle, sensitive fields of negotiations, well, our negotiation team is engaged and we are not replacing them. We trust Michel Barnier, his team in negotiations, and what they are talking about and what they are concerned about is level playing field. And this is true, and in order to save also and to protect the right of our people, of our employees, of our employers, of our business.
Can the EU strike a trade deal with a British government that says it's prepared to break international law?
As I said, this could undermine all efforts, and I hope it will not happen.
Linas Linkevicius, Foreign Minister of Lithuania, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for watching Talking Europe as well. Stay tuned, plenty more European news and international news coming up on France 24.
France 24, c'est la richesse de la diversité culturelle mondiale avec un réseau de correspondants à travers la planète.
En France 24 en español comunicamos a Latinoamérica con el mundo entero.
روح مهنية شعارها واحد حرية التعبير. هذه هي بصمة France 24.
Africa on France 24 is about its people and their stories.
Los ciudadanos nos cuentan cuáles son las iniciativas y las problemáticas que tienen en sus comunidades a través del programa Los Observadores. Eso los acerca aún más a France 24.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.